Another important group I wanted to talk about was kind of youth, right? And we briefly touch upon it, but kind of everywhere around globe and India, it seems that youth are the one who are much more vulnerable. They are suffering more from unemployment. They need to kind of get jobs, but their unemployment rate are high, right? So how do you see this kind of pandemic playing out to them and their future kind of job aspiration as well as employment?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because I think this the youth cohort is a very important one to target, and I think in fact JPAL's labor market research agenda centers around issues faced by the youth in accessing the labor market, in ensuring a smooth transition from their education to work, and ensuring that they are able to contribute to the labor market in a continued fashion. To reduce the discrimination that they may be facing. So this is absolutely a very, very important question, and something that JPAL researchers are very interested in. So for instance, and if you look at the pandemic context, we don't have much to say, but I think small insights and some efforts that are ongoing. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, there's this, as you know, we have an institutional partnership with the government of Tamil Nadu. JPAL has had this for over since 2014. And JPAL affiliated researchers, Clement Imbert and co-researcher Gaurav Chiplunkar, did a survey, a phone survey of youth who were past graduates from industrial training institutes or ITIs in Tamil Nadu. And, this survey aimed to understand skill gaps and unemployment patterns in the light of COVID, especially the sectors, the nature of work, and youth expectations and preferences going forward. So the report is not out, so I'm unable to share results at present. But I think broadly the survey found that workers had undergone various transitions in terms of the nature, occupation of industries, occupation and industry of work. So for instance, many reported transitions were in the nature and skill level of their occupation pre and post lockdown, which sort of changed. And similarly, youth were willing to do this whole inter-district migration, but at a premium, if they were offered a premium to do so. So I think, more broadly, if I were to connect this to the JPAL's research work on youth and addressing the challenges specifically faced by youth, it's important to understand the binding constraints that youth may face in accessing the labor market, be this, and then design, interventions and test them to bridge these constraints. So these could be just simple access to information on where are the jobs or where are the skill trainings which would match their interests. What are some of these programs that maybe targeting the cognitive, technical, non-cognitive skills. What are some of the matching constraints that these youth may face? So often they may be trained, but they may not know how to find a job, or they may face barriers to really know, they may not have the social network to be able to find this job. And equally, so these are on the supply side, but as I mentioned, equally important is to understand the demand side challenges faced by firms. They have reported skill gaps. They are unable to find workers as well. So matching is equally important from the demand side of things. And understanding what are some of these key barriers and the interaction of these. Many times it's not just one, but like it's an interaction of some of these barriers that are faced both on the demand as well as the supply side. So I think just understanding these barriers and then designing interventions to plug and test these, to pilot and then test these, is really the way JPAL approaches some of these broader questions that have to do with youth and employment and access to labor markets.
So this kind of whole search friction that you talk a lot about. So you talked about information being one of the major issue, where kind of there are employers who are looking for workers or employees where employees are looking for jobs, right? And there is no mismatch. Apart from them, what would be another key focus area for JPAL researcher or open question that needs people to work on?
Yeah, so I think absolutely. While information, skilling is the first part of the chain, a lot of the gaps in improving labor market outcomes uh, 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 for youth happen at this matching stage, right? So existing research has looked into programs focused on reducing these frictions, these job search barriers, which often improve job seekers' employment outcomes. So these programs can help job seekers identify where and how to look for jobs, but equally encourage increased search efforts, because sometimes they don't value the search, and there are search costs that are faced, and sort of even help them communicate qualifications better to employers. So some of these programs, a review of I think 19 RCTs, randomized evaluations of job search assistance interventions, showed that these types of programs really helped improve their search efforts of youth and help them look for jobs in better places, improving their ability to communicate, their qualifications, also helped firms identify them and hire them. Although in a few cases it was also found, when this was measured, which was feasible to measure, some of these gains were at the expense of job seekers who did not receive the program. So implying that job search assistance may just sort of nearly reshuffle, who got the limited number of available jobs. So that's something that needs to be studied further. One early review of such job search assistance programs in the US found that a variety of programs decreased the time it took for a participant to find a job. However, there's not as much evidence in developing countries. There's some evidence in developing country contexts on where information about jobs can be costly to acquire, reducing barriers to this information. In these contexts where it's really costly, alleviating these barriers can have large effects on sort of job outcomes. So, for instance, I think this was in Ethiopia, giving transport subsidies to youth, which increased their mobility and allowed them to, go to a city center where there were these job boards and they were located there, increased their chances of being able to find a formal employment by like 32%. And sort of the community funds allowed youth to more actively pursue opportunities and increase the likelihood that an application would be successful.
And this
Similarly, I think there are, sorry, go ahead.
similar work in Bangladesh, right? They have found
Yes,
some evidence in the primary trial as well. Yeah.
exactly. And so I think there are the other type of, other such interventions have motivated job seekers more in their search with, helping them recognize their skills, communicate them to the employers. So, for instance, linking these job search activities to unemployment insurance in the US, or job search plans in South Africa, or CV and interview workshops in Ethiopia. So there's that bit of research that's very interesting as well. And sort of, I think, one other study was finding the right information about candidates' preferences. That could also be this was studied by Professor Abhijit Banerjee and co-researcher Gaurav Chiplunkar, and this was in UP. So they conducted a survey for eliciting unbiased job preferences of skills trainees, which itself is hard to do, right? Using both these hypothetical and real choices and varying job characteristics across all of these job offers or job vacancies, and then randomize them into a treatment group where the rankings were shared with the placement coordinators of these skills centers, and a comparison group where they were not shared. And what they found was that, placement officers who had access to this information on job preferences came close to efficiently match candidates to interviews subject to, the information constraints on preferences. So I think this led to substantial improvement in this matching process and subsequent employment outcomes, 6 months, up to 6 months down the line after initial placement. So I think these are the sort of, sorry, you're saying something.
I was saying, when I read that paper, that one of the things that I noticed was, at the moment when you're thinking about this, you think that the people who are kind of training these workers, working with them for decent amount of time, would know much better of how this would work, and you realize how much even inefficiency lie in each stage of the process, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. So I think overall, when many studies have shown positive impacts of outcomes such as interview offers, job offers, employment, quality of employment, not all studies of this kind of, these job search assistance programs have measured or shown sustained benefits on earning total employment. So I think these longer term results need to be studied a bit more. And so this is an area where there is definitely further research needed.
Yeah, especially kind of the whole big NSDC or DDGUKY schemes, which government of India investing heavily in terms of skilling. Like there are a lot of downward and upward linkages that still remain understudied hugely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even when you look at the skilling literature, it's the results are mixed, and often men and women face differential constraints. So women face added constraints to continuing to access trainings, and then also linkages with employment. So I think teasing out one another research area is very important as far as the skilling ecosystem is concerned, where majority is this third party government funded short term training programs. I think to unbundle which components of trainings are working, and sort of which may not be as so there's some evidence on integrating non-cognitive skilling, which is super important, and not just looking at technical. So I think unbundling the various components of training and these linkages, which are both before the mobilization stage, who are you targeting, which courses, but equally how that matching process is happening and being sustained in the labor market is super important.
Yeah. For example, one of the new very exciting project that we're undertaking is on mental health of migrant workers. So we're kind of trying to, because attrition, like you said, dropouts for training is huge issue. Even attrition for firms is huge issue, because when this worker come, they would, lot of time they leave very early, right? And one of the barriers is kind of when you move from this village base where you have social security and support system, when you move to this alien really hard working space in a city, you don't have that kind of support, right? So we are working on intervention where kind of a low cost mental health intervention for these migrant workers, and that kind of we hope to kind of solve some of these things which kind of prevent a lot of women workers to kind of come and join the labor force in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was it from my end, and it was so nice to have you and think more about kind of this whole COVID thing. I think has kind of shown with stark realities how much vulnerability are there and how much we need to study more. I think my key takeaway from
Oh,
this.
absolutely. And I think this whole thing on first measuring, understanding who the migrants are, what the migrant corridors are, what are some of these flows, and then using that as a starting point to target benefits, combining administrative data, but also looking at high frequency data collection, which leverages, mobile phone penetration, combined with this transaction data from digital transactions and payments. All of these will become crucial in solving this issue and ensuring that we have higher resilience if we are faced with a similar crisis, God forbid, in the future. And sort of like even the survey that I
Hopefully
spoke
not,
about.
not in the near future.
No, absolutely. But sort of, I think this has given us some sort of it's hit the pause button for us to think of longer term resilience, and not just looking at short term band-aid solutions to some of these development problems. So I think that's really key. And as mentioned earlier, even in this the survey of Bihar and Jharkhand that I alluded to, I think the key insight was that people's preferences for the future. So amongst first, migrants need to be protected by safety nets where they live and work And that's very important. And this protection cannot only be legislated, and that's a very important thing. It's just not a legislative solution. To be effective, it really needs to be coupled with efforts to actually enroll these migrants into social programs. And second, as we said, especially women need structured support for reintegrating into the labor markets. And so these nuanced policies would be very important to look into going forward.
Yeah. Thanks. It was pleasure talking to you. Have a nice week ahead and happy
Thank you
holidays.
so much. You too.